By now, if you've been tuning in, you know about some of my madcap adventures. There are so many more, including my spiritual pilgrimage in India. But that's a story for another time. This episode, aptly named, has to do with how I came to be on fire, literally, and very nearly became Amish.
Yes, that's right. Amish.
It was my 41st birthday, and I decided to take a secret trip to Lancaster. My fascination with the Amish isn't so far-fetched as you might think. My ancestry is from there on my mom's side. My grandmother was from an Amish family. I love the idea of living off the land far away from the noise and complexity of urban life. So I set off to learn as much as I could within a weekend. But my psychosis had been going untreated for far too long, and by that Sunday, I found myself in a train station, being held by police officers, waiting for siblings to come fetch me. It wasn't the first time this happened, but it was getting bad.
I gave up the internet and computers in general. I destroyed every cell phone given to me, even those I borrowed. I was convinced that technology was the work of the devil and that cell phones were the way the devil stole your soul. I was becoming dangerous. Then I stopped using electricity altogether. I made candles and used a lantern at night.
And I walked everywhere in the middle of winter. I walked to my dad, who lived 10 miles away. I walked 15 miles to my sister, and of course, in between, to churches. These weren't safe routes. I was walking on highways with oncoming traffic. I was walking alone in hypothermic temperatures. I was full-on psychotic. It wasn't long after that when I got picked up by the police for the last time. I was taken away in my pajamas. Just the fact that I was making and using candles was a tip-off to my insanity.
Caught myself on fire a little more than an hour ago. I was just standing there eating my mashed potatoes in my underwear when all of a sudden I lit into flames. That's never happened before. I wonder what it is they say. Is there too much heat inside of me? Am I one big giant ball of energy? Will it ever happen again? I wasn't burned. You can't tell it to look at me that my skin was flaming just moments ago. But the very funniest thing is that I didn't panic. It was like it was the most natural thing in the world. And that's why I wonder all these things. Like maybe all of the confusion and emptiness that's built a fence around the space called me was just waiting to be burned away, and maybe now I can be free. If that were the case, then I wouldn't mind so much being consumed by the fire.
Rewind 3 years. It was 2014, and I was packing up my belongings for yet another move. A candle sitting on the floor caught my clothes on fire. I wish I could tell you there was a stop, drop, and roll, but instead I ran around my kitchen screaming, "I'm on fire, I'm on fire!" And I tried to put the fire out with my hands. I don't recommend that, by the way. Apparently, I had a high threshold of pain because I refused painkillers. I fought the paramedics as they loaded me into the ambulance. 3rd-degree burns on my legs and hands. I had to have surgery and skin grafts on my legs. Eventually, I was transferred to rehab, where I had to learn to walk on my stapled legs. The scars will never go away. They remind me of my respect for fire. I was in rehab for 2 months, and when I was released, I had nowhere to go. My landlady had evicted me while I was in the hospital.
I was invited to live temporarily with a family from my church. My family had had enough of me. It was just one emergency after another, and they needed a break. Within a month, I had found assistance from the Red Cross and got a new apartment. It was around this time that I started living full-time as an Amish person. I had survived a fire only to live in a 3rd-story apartment playing with fire in my living room. This is what psychosis does.
Rewind again 2 years. Now, to give you an idea what psychosis is like, Let me paint you a picture. I'm at the airport waiting for my family to pick me up when a hippie asked me for a light. I not only hopped in the car with the guy who came to pick her up, but I ended up living with this guy in a garage in the middle of nowhere. He himself was a mental case, but we had fun together until it got bad. He taught me how to be a lapidary artist, and I was making money selling my cabochons and incense burners on Etsy. I was known as the Zen lapidary because I believed I was the Buddha, specifically the medicine Buddha. I had gone to India, I had achieved enlightenment, and now I was living with a maniac, far from anyone who cared about me during the worst ice storm in Pennsylvania history. To appease my dad, I got a studio apartment in Newcastle. I was left there with no car, waiting every day to see if my insane boyfriend would pick me up so we could go play. I was powerless at the whim of this maniac. Eventually, the biting became violent. While in a headlock, I managed to call 911 and scream the address of his house. A cop showed up and transported me to a women's shelter. My family came to rescue me again.
Why do we resist the help of those who love us the most? Because when you're broken, you don't know or want to accept it.
Jay was the boyfriend of a girl who had died of a heroin overdose. He got her hooked on it, and her sister was the hippie girl at the airport. I stayed with her too, intermittently, working as a housekeeper. She encouraged me to stay away from him, but it was such a magical time, albeit delusional. I was making gems out of rock. I was the medicine Buddha. I was fine. I've had a habit of attracting crazy lovers. I myself was no catch though, at this point. After meditating for an hour, I would smoke a bowl, drink a beer, and have a cigarette. I was a hypocrite, a false messiah, a hot mess. I left Jay along with all my lapidary art, dropped the quantum physics therapist that my dad was paying for, and headed back to my sister.
She was always my true north. She was always there when I needed her, always picking me up somewhere when I was lost. And I was so lost. I was homeless, afraid, and lost. But she never stopped loving me, even when she 302'd me, even when she left me in jail. She practiced tough love after years of trying to help unsuccessfully. She pleaded with me in jail that she needed her sister back.
My sister says I was a different person then. She calls my transformation miraculous. Manic episodes of thieving and promiscuity aside, I am a prolific artist with 2 movies, 2 books, and a short-lived hip-hop gig behind me. I've been unstable the majority of my life. It takes a lot of hard work every day to choose mental health. It isn't just about medication and therapy. There has to be the will to get better. I hate mental illness. It's a burden, an invisible disease. No one knows that underneath all that productivity lies a broken mind. No one knows how much effort it takes to overcome nagging psychosis. It's a solitary journey, one that I wish on no one.
But returning to my family was one of the best decisions of my life. It brought me back to reality.
But working through psychosis has awarded me the ability to leave the edges wide. So when I say that there is little that I can't relate to with people, that's for real. If you ever play with fire, just remember it's a vicious beast once it penetrates your skin, so avoid that. And if you're curious to know anything about the Amish, I'm your gal. I had a Mennonite pen pal for quite some time who taught me pretty much everything I ever wanted to know. Unfortunately, it involves speaking German, which happens to be the only language I didn't learn in college. Now, I'll bet you didn't know all of that about me now, did you? Up next, an emotional roller coaster right around the corner in our next episode, Planet Smart.